Hello, it's Yvonne from the Fabric Hut. Welcome to my sewing room today. How are you doing with your bindings? Yeah? We did straight binding last week. This week we're going to work on bias binding, how to make a bias binding and how to apply a bias binding. Now this is just a real quick little circle that I did. All my grandkids have placemats at my house. The 2-year-old decided she needs a unicorn placemat. So I just threw together one real quickly so that we could play with the bias binding. So if you're ready to go, let's head over to my sewing machine and get going.
Okay, so to make our bias binding, I'm going to start with a 15-inch square, and I've already done it, but you'll cut it diagonally one time. So you have two pieces with the bias here in the middle and the straight of grain on the outside edges. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this and we're going to reverse their position. So take this one and slide it down, keeping it in the same direction, and just swap them like that. So now instead of having a square, you have this very long, what would that be called? Parallelogram, maybe? I don't know. But you have this long, you've got two straight of grains here, bias and bias. And what we're going to do is we're going to just flip this over as so, leaving about 1/4 of an inch poking out on each end, like that. And we are going to sew them together right down this straight of grain seam. Just like this. Now I would normally change to a purple thread, but I want you to be able to see this. So I'm leaving it in a contrasting color for you. And we're just going to go right down that side. Now with this 15-inch square, it's going to make, probably about 60 inches of bias binding. If you cut it at 2.5 inches. Okay, so now that is sewn together. When you do your binding with a straight binding, remember you want to separate out this seam so that it lays flatter for everything. So we're going to bring up our pressing mat here, and I'm going to press this seam open. Give it a little finger press to set it. Then we will just press that seam open flat so that there's no bulk in our seam, especially since with this bias binding, we're going to have more joins than we do with a straight binding. We're going to have quite a few joins. Okay, and there we go. And we are nice and flat now. Okay, so now we are ready to make our binding with this piece. So in preparations, we're going to be making a 2.5-inch binding. You can make them whatever your favorite size is. Actually, you know what? I think I'm going to bring that down. I'm going to make it 2.25. So this is my 2.5-inch ruler. I have that, and I have my white chalk pencil because this is a darker fabric. I want you to be able to see it. So I'm going to just line up on the 2.25 right there, all the way up. Now we need to start all the way at the bottom here. And I'm going to just draw a line and see if it's dark enough that you can see. Yep, you can see that. Okay, and I'm going to draw it all the way up this first side. Okay, so I have a 2.25-inch strip right there. Now I want to continue this all the way across this piece. So I'm going to now line up on this line. I will line up my 2.25, just like that. Bring it down so I'm getting all the way to the edge. And I'm going to do that again. And I'm going to continue drawing this line all the way across every 2.25 inches all the way across this piece of fabric. I think it's going to take 4 lines for this. You can go on and Google continuous bias binding, and there's a number of different charts that will tell you how big of a square to start with to get the number of inches you need to finish your project. I'm just doing this very small little project. This is going to be more binding than I need to do my little placemat, but you know, you can always have extra binding. I do keep my binding scraps in a tote, and so when I need like a scrap binding for something, it's nice. I can just pull out all my extras, hook them together, and call it wonderful. Okay, so now we have all 4 lines drawn. See that? 1, 2, 3, and 4. We have a little bit extra. That's okay. All right, now this is the part that gets just a smidge tricky. You are going to take this and you're going to fold it right sides together. Now you have this little weird angle here. What we're going to do is we are going to line up, let me get over here, we are going to line up the first line on this end, right there, the first line to the second line on this end. So we're going to take it, we're going to give it a little twist. It kind of makes a little funny mess here. That's okay. We're going to have to move it around and scrunch it. So first line here to the second line here, and line it up to where you have your little bit of a 1/4 of an inch. Take and put a pin 1/4 of an inch down your line here, and then find your line on this side, the 1/4 of an inch. There you go. Now you know you've got them where those lines are going to match up. And stay within the camera frame. There we go. And then do it again on this one. You want to line up those seams. Poke it in on one side. Oh, see, now it's way off over there. So we're going to bring it over. Get it right at the 1/4 of an inch line. And snug those together. And now you could do this with your Wonder Clips if you wanted. Whatever way you work. Now, we had 4 lines, but we're only matching up 3 of them because remember we have that first line hanging off. Okay, and get it lined up there good. Now, if you draw your lines on the right side instead of the inside, you can match them up this way. It doesn't matter which side you draw your lines on, just so long as they're even. Okay, now we have it all laid out like that. Okay. Now what we're going to do is start at this point, or one of the points, and we're just going to sew a 1/4 of an inch long all the way through, pulling out your pins as you get to them. And readjusting this funny shape right there. And just so, make sure you don't have anything caught in the back. I have a little pucker there, so I can pull it out. I just kind of run my finger to feel if I have any bumps where I don't need a bump. There we go. And sew it all the way up through the end. And there we go. We're going to take it apart. Now you have a tube like this. It's a little off center, but it's a tube. Okay? All right, now your tube looks a little strange. But you see right here, you have a 2 1/4 inch on this end. On this side, it's only got that short piece. So you're going to start with your 2 1/4. Excuse me. It is allergy season here in Oregon. So, okay, we're going to start. And you can do this with your rotary cutter, but it's very difficult. So I just use scissors because there's so much fabric everywhere. I don't want to accidentally cut the wrong thing. So I'm just going to start right here at this 2 1/4, and I'm going to start just cutting all the way through, just following this line. It's going to take me all the way to the end, and I will have this wonderful amount of bias binding. Is it terribly important that I don't have any little wiggles? No, because it's going to be in the seam of your binding. So do the best you can to get it nice and straight, but don't lose sleep if you have a little notch here or a little wiggle there. All going to work out in the end. There are certain things in quilting that you have to be super duper careful to be accurate on. This is not one of them. Now you notice I have not pressed this seam yet. I could stop and press it, but it kind of gets, well, it's going to let me here. Once I've cut that first one off, it's going to let me lay it flat. It doesn't always let you lay it flat. So sometimes I just wait and press it once I've got it all cut. This one's laying nicely, so we'll just give it a quick whoop. Oop, I just folded it over, didn't I? Just a quick little, I didn't even put my pressing mat down because I'm doing it so quickly. Probably wasn't my best idea, but no harm, no foul. Okay, and then just continue on. You can wait and do that pressing once you're all done. Just go back and press open all those little seams. You are going to have more seams with a bias binding than you have with a straight binding. You're going to have about twice as many. See, I got a little wiggly there. Oh, well, we'll straighten it out. You will have about twice as many seams, but again, they're flat, so they're not going to affect the integrity of your project. Okay, I'm about halfway. So when is the time to use a bias binding versus a straight binding? I know I talked about this a little bit at the beginning, but any time that you have a curve, if you use a straight binding, you're going to get a little pucker every now and again in your binding. Whereas if you use a bias, it is going to lay smooth so you don't have that little pucker. It's so easy to make it once you get the technique down. So you can use bias binding on everything if you like. Some people feel like it is a little bit of sturdier binding because you're not on the straight grain. I don't know about that. I suppose in theory, but straight is just so easy when you're doing a whole quilt that, you know, I tend to use straight bindings and bias on curved bindings. Okay, so we're back here to the end. And now all we have to do is, I can unstitch that or just snip off at an angle and lose 1/4 of an inch. That I know I have plenty, so I'm not going to worry about that. And that goes into the garbage. And there we go. We have a beautiful bias binding. Okay. Just like any other binding, you are going to press it in half. Just like that. Now, with the bias binding, it is sometimes a little tricky to close the binding on a circle when you come around. So if you have like a scalloped edge that has a curve and then some straighter area and then a curve and a straighter area, you can close it any way you like. But I find that when I'm doing a bias binding, it is easier for me to close my binding up if I start by pressing over 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to get my mat out because I want this to press really hard. If you press over 1/4 of an inch on one end, Give it a little finger press, and there we go. Now, when I come back to that end on the quilt, I will tuck my other side in. Okay, so right or wrong sides together. I'm going to make a little, we're just going to iron it. Now, I will take this over to my big ironing station and iron the whole thing. Because otherwise it's going to take a long time with my little teeny iron here on my little teeny ironing board, and we don't have time for that. So I will be back with it all pressed, and we'll go on to how to apply it to our placemat. Okay, here we are through the magic of TV or video or whatever. Our 15-inch square made 80 inches of 2 1/4 inch binding. So that was pretty good. And remember that little piece we cut off? It would have made the same of 2.5. So, okay, what I have done here is this was the end. And remember I had folded it under? When I did that, it gave me the angle at the wrong side. So I just backed up to the first seam, which is right there, and took that off. So that now my opening is looking this direction, so that I can put it right here on my project. I can just start right there and have it going the right way. If I had it, let me get the other end and it's going to show you what I mean. The other way, it would have put my opening down under here and it would have been hard for me to see it. So I just cut my angle the opposite direction so that I have my end piece where I want it. And I'm going to just start. I still have on my 1/4 inch foot. I am just going to start right here at the end and get that right where I want it, exactly where I want it. And you can go through and clip your binding on. Use your Wonder Clips and clip it on all the way around, or you can just put it on. Now, the trick with a bias binding on a curve is you don't want to stretch your binding. You want to keep it snug so that it lays nice, but you don't want to do a big stretch. And you're just going to go around. When I come here, I need to make sure that that seam is tucked under where I want it. And see how it is laying up and I have all this fullness here? I want that. I don't want to stretch it to where there's no fullness there. And we just go around the whole thing, adjusting as you go. Just laying it down smooth and going right around. This won't take very long because it's a pretty small little placemat. I know the other kids have bigger ones, but she's just a 2-year-old. She doesn't need a huge one for her crackers and things. I mean, how many raisins can one 2-year-old eat? Well, she actually is a pretty good eater, so she can eat quite a few. But this will be plenty big enough for her. But it's good to know that with a 15-inch square, I could have made it much larger and still had enough binding. Okay. You know, I'm coming up to a seam here, but look how nice it's laying flat. It's spread out, so I'm not going to have the big, massive bulk in a seam. Almost halfway around. I'm just kind of feeding this under with my finger because it is that fullness. I don't want to pleat, but I don't want it to get caught on my presser foot either. So just keep it feeding it gently. Do a little bit at a time. Like I say, you can pin this or use your Wonder Clips. Either way, it's a pretty forgiving little situation here. Now I'm almost back to the beginning. Okay, now I'm so close to the beginning. What I need to do is I need to see where my opening is right here. I need to cut this piece longer than that. I want it to come all the way in here. So I'm going to cut it right about there, just eyeball it and cut it. And I still have lots of binding set aside for another project. Okay, I'm going to come up here. So right up to that spot. Okay, now I have all of this. It's not all going to fit in that little hole. What I'm going to do is, this side is the important side. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to cut at an angle a little ways like that. And now I can just tuck this little end right in my little opening there. Sometimes you need to use, where'd my stiletto go? There it is. Sometimes you need to use a little stiletto to kind of tuck it in there nice and flat. But see how that is? I feel a little lump here, so I'm going to just run this in and make sure it's down. Oh, much better. And now I'm going to just close that hole up. And come all the way back to where I started. Okay. Now, this little hole is going to have an open seam here, so I will tack that down either with some glue, or I typically do a couple little hidden stitches to cover that up, because I like to hand stitch my bindings. So I put it on the front, rolling it to the back. Look how it just naturally goes right there to the back. Whoop, so beautifully. There we go. And then when you're on the back, you just run your hands through it like this, and it just rolls over perfectly. Now, you see how this does cover my line of stitching. So I could go from the front and do it by machine. I could go from here, and I can feel that my binding is bigger than my front. So I could just stitch in the ditch right here. However, this one, I want it to be a little bit more reversible. So she can have lunch on this side and dinner on this side. So I'm going to come in, and instead of doing it by machine, which would leave me with a seam right here and this kind of flopping loose, I will sit in the evening and just hand stitch that down very quickly. And I will have her little placemat ready for her on Monday when she comes to visit. I hope that technique is helpful. If you have any questions, you just drop a message in the comments, and I'll try and get back to you as quick as I can. So thank you for joining me for our bias binding video, and join me next week as we try a whole new technique. Have a great day.